everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Jill and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in December. I actually managed to read 11 books this past month and I wanted to chat about them with you guys. I know that it is already like almost the middle of January and I've already done my worst books of the year, my best books of the year, all of my end of the year videos, so this probably seems a little bit late, so I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible. Normally for my wrap-ups for the last couple of months, I normally go in an order of my best books that I read in the month all the way down to my least favorite books of the month, but I decided for December I'm just going to kind of talk about them in random order because I actually read like 3 books in the same series and then they all get different ratings, and so it would just be like weirdly like out of order if I ordered this video strictly due to like star ratings. So yeah, I'm just going to like randomly talk about books like as I see fit. And yeah, I don't know what this is, but let's just get started. The first book that I wanted to talk about is actually the last book that I managed to finish in 2020, and that is Heartstopper by Oseman. This book I gave a whopping 5 out of 5 stars, of course. This book was the sweetest thing and I was constantly smiling the entire hour that I was reading it. This is a really beloved graphic novel and I love the art style. I'm normally not a graphic novel person, but everyone had said that this book was absolutely fantastic. You can actually get this book for free online, but I personally wanted to buy the physical copies just to support the author and because I think I would enjoy like reading a graphic novel physically. It basically follows these 2 boys that are in high school named Nick and Charlie. It's all about those early stages of having a crush on someone and like being so nervous about talking to them or thinking, oh my gosh, do they like me back, and all things like that. It was really sweet, and like I said, I was smiling like the entire hour that I was reading it, and I will hopefully be picking up the other volumes in this series sometime in the future. Next, I read books 2, 3, and 4 in the Wayward children's series by Seanan McGuire. I read the first book a couple months ago. Basically, it follows all of these different kids who find doorways to magical worlds, and all of the worlds are personalized to them. And so some of this series, you take place in those different worlds that the children are in, and then some of the other stories, it takes place in the real world after the children have come back from these magical worlds and they're trying to adjust to the real world again. So number 2 is Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which I really loved, and when I read it I thought that it was way better than the first one. I gave it a 4.5 stars. This takes place solely in a magical world which is heavily inspired by gothic novels. Think like Dracula and Frankenstein like put into like one story, and I really loved it. We follow 2 characters that we saw in the first book, Jack and Jill. First off, it is so weird to read a book that features your name, especially considering the kind of like person that Jill is. It was just super weird to read about. Yeah, really loved this one. I think Jack is probably my favorite character in this whole series. Next, the third one is called Beneath the Sugar Sky. I actually ended up giving this one only 3 stars, maybe a 2.5, because this one felt way more disjointed compared to the other ones. This book kind of takes place in the real world, but also in a magical world, but it follows characters that we saw in the first book, but also some characters that are brand new to us, and it just felt very disjointed, and it was really hard to pinpoint exactly what the point of this book was. It was enjoyable, it was quick and easy to read, but personally just really not my favorite. And then the 4th book is In an Absent Dream, which I also gave a 4.5, and now this and Down Among the Sticks and Bones are tied for my favorite book in this series. This one just blew me out of the water. This is another one that takes place in the real world and in the magical world, but mostly in the magical world, and we do follow another character from that first book. I know this might be a little bit confusing if you haven't read these books, I am so sorry. So this one follows a character named Lundy, and I feel like this book was the most developed out of all the books in the series. I loved reading about Lundy and her world, and I just feel like she was developed way more than any of the other characters besides maybe Jack and Jill, but I still feel like Lundy, I feel like I know better. All like super short, and so it's kind of hard to connect to the characters sometimes, but I feel like I was totally connected to Lundy. That's why I think it might be my favorite now, but I'm not totally sure, but it was a lot of fun. Next up, I read a book that made it onto my best books of the year list, so you guys can go check that out if you haven't seen it yet, and that is The Poppy War by RF Kuang. I've talked about this book a lot recently on my channel, so I'm going to keep this short and sweet. This is a grimdark fantasy that follows a girl named Rin, and half of the story is her at this military academy, and the other half she is at war with her classmate. Very brutal, very triggering, but overall very remarkable and brilliant, and I just loved it, and I cannot believe that RF Kuang wrote this when she did. It's inspired by real Asian history, and it really does live up to the hype. I know that lots of people have been talking about this book lately, but it really does live up to the hype, and it's just so interesting because Rin is definitely a morally great character. So if you really like morally great characters, I would definitely pick this one up. Excited to read The Dragon Republic hopefully in January sometime soon. Next, I read an adult romance that I actually owned physically. If you could tell from like my adult romance shelf. I really do not own a lot of physical adult romances. I normally listen to most of them on audiobook or read them through ebooks through my library. But this one I bought because it was just kind of unavailable through all of my sources, and that is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. And I actually surprisingly really enjoyed this one. I had heard really good things but also mixed things about it, so I was kind of wary going into it, and also like the synopsis kind of sounds like a tad ridiculous, but it totally worked within the bounds of this book, and I really loved it. This follows a guy named Gavin and a girl named Thea, and their marriage is on the brink of shambles. Thea has asked for a divorce, and Gavin doesn't really know what to do, so he turns to his guy friends. His guy friends have this underground book club where they all read historical romances or romance novels in order to understand their wives or their girlfriends better. Gavin is a baseball player, so all of these guys that are in this book club are all like super macho sports guys, and so it was really hilarious watching them like geek out over historical romances. It sounds ridiculous, but again, within this story, it was just so much fun to read about. I've come to find that I love second chance romances or a couple trying to fix a marriage, and especially romances that contain children, and this book has all of those, and so I really checked all my boxes and I really enjoyed reading it. I loved Gavin and Thea and how they had to face their demons while trying to fix their marriage. Excited to continue on with the companion series whenever I get around to it, and it was just really a fun time. I think I ended up giving this a 4.252 as well, so it's definitely one of my new favorite adult romances. So happy about that. The next book I have is one that I totally picked up on a whim, and that is Tiny Pretty Things by Sona, Charaipotra, I think, and Dhonielle Clayton. I picked up this book because of the Netflix show. Everyone was talking about it, and I had heard Haley from Haley and Bookland talk about it and actually say that she really enjoyed this book. I've watched like almost all of the show, and it has nothing to do with the book. Like, characters have totally different names, like everything is different. You don't need to read the book before. You won't be spoiled for either if you consume both of them. I only gave it 3 stars, but I actually had a really fun time with it because the drama in this book was so insane. Apparently recently I just love books that contain pointless drama. I don't know when that change happened in me, but apparently now I really enjoy it. This book was definitely more of a guilty pleasure read. It is not the most well-written book in the world, and again, lots of the drama I feel like was pretty pointless. It was just there for the sake of adding drama. I also felt that it was pretty repetitive, or a lot of it, so I feel like it could have been much shorter because there were a lot of interactions and a lot of inner dialogue within the 3 characters that seemed very repetitive. I just realized that I did not say what this book is about. In case you have missed the hype around the TV show, this basically follows this ballet school, this really prestigious ballet school, and all the girls hate each other and there's a lot of drama. They're constantly like trying to bring each other down in order to get lead roles, and that's basically what it is about. Like I said, the drama is super juicy, but overall, like, it wasn't like the best thing that I've ever read, but I am glad that I read it. I'm not sure I'm going to be continuing on with the sequel. I haven't seen the best reviews for it, and also I don't know if I care enough about the 3 main characters in order to read a whole nother book about them. I'm not quite sure yet, but this one was definitely a good way to pass my time. Next up, I have Legendborn by Tracy, Deonn, and this book was so much fun. This is basically a retelling of King Arthur. It follows our main character Bree, who witnesses a magical attack on her first day at college in North Carolina, and she finds out that she might actually have powers of her own after this magical attack, and so she basically gets swept away into the secret society of the descendants of Arthur, and they all have magical powers, and so it's this really interesting urban fantasy. I feel like this book is most prominently about grief because Bree has also lost her mother very recently, and then with the magical attack and everything, she finds out that her mother actually might have been hiding something from her. And yeah, I was surprised by how much this book really does focus on grief, and Bree really goes through it in this book. This book also touches on racism as well because Bree, she is like the only black girl that is accepted into like this secret society. It's another thing that really set it apart from most YA fantasies. I will say I ended up giving this a 4 stars. I was a teeny bit disappointed just how slow I felt like this book was. And I felt that it was a tad heavy on the info dumping, but once we got like past, you know, like the halfway, maybe like 2/3 point, then it really started to pick up and I was really interested. But that first, when we were trying to understand the world and stuff, felt a little bit slow to me, so that was a tad disappointing. But I'm really excited to see what Tracy Deonn does with the rest of this series, and I really do think that it was interesting and definitely worth your time if the concept interests you and you really like diverse YA fantasy to see, this is definitely one to look out for. Next up, I read The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. This is the second book in the Kiss of Deception series, and I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. And the first book follows this girl named Lyssa, and she doesn't want to get married to this crown prince in the neighboring kingdom, so she runs away, and then an assassin and a crown prince follow her, and you don't know who is who, and it's really just such a fun concept. So this follows the aftermath of the first book. It really picks up like immediately after the first book. The book takes place in a totally different like kingdom than the previous book. I really love the expansion of the world. I thought the drama was a bit ridiculous and annoying, but I still really had a good time with it, and I loved getting to know our characters more. I love Rafe like no tomorrow, and I'm totally team Rafe, and this book definitely solidified that in my mind. I did feel a tad like it suffered a little bit from second book syndrome, just because I wish that the world had expanded just a little bit more, and that we got to know about Leah's identity a little bit more, and I feel like this book was really setting up for the third book, which I will hopefully be reading soon. I just wish this one was a tiny bit more expansive, but again, I did really have fun with it, and this series is one that constantly takes me by surprise by how much I enjoy it. Next up, I read a book that actually made it into my most disappointing books of the year, and that is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. And again, because I talked about my most disappointing books of the year, which you can find on my channel, I won't go really in depth about this now. This is marketed as a dark academia horror story. Besides like the first third of the book, I was kind of just bored with it. It follows two different timelines, one in the past where lots of girls are being killed at this boarding school, and in the present where we're also following like a group of girls, but they are in a movie about the school, about the girls that were getting killed back in the day. So you switch in between these two time periods trying to figure out like what is all going on, and I just found it really like lackluster and boring. Now this is probably just me personally, like I feel like there are lots of people out there who would really love this book. It was just too slow and confusing for me to really get behind, and I ended up only giving it like a 2 stars because I did really enjoy the queer representation in this book. This book is very queer, but overall it just didn't really hold my attention, and it was like a 19-hour audiobook that I really felt like I had to push myself through. So that was really unfortunate, but if the concept sounds interesting to you, then, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad book. Like, I feel like there are lots of people out there who would really enjoy this book. But yeah, definitely was not for me. Okay, and the last book that I ended up reading in December, let's see if I can get through this before my battery dies, and that is The Governess Game by Tessa. This is my second historical romance that I gave a try, and I loved it way more than the first historical romance that I tried, which was actually the first book in this Girl Meets Duke series called The Duchess Deal. It follows this woman named Alexandra, and she is really into astronomy, and she is trying to make her living on being an astronomer, but when something goes wrong, all those plans go to shit basically, and she ends up having to become a governess, even though she is underqualified for this duke named Chase, or duke to be named Chase. And Chase is actually the guardian of these 2 little girls. They're not his kids, but he's just taking care of them, and so Alexandra has to take care of these kids as well, and the kids were just so adorable and sweet, and I love the inclusion of children in my romances, so I really think that is why this book just exceeded my expectations and why I loved it so much. I loved Alexandra and Chase's relationship. I loved that Alexandra, you know, was really an independent woman, and she wanted to be an astronomer, even though astronomy at that time was a really male-dominated field. She was still really passionate about it. And again, this book really jump-started my love for historical romances. It was so sweet and sexy and steamy, and it just had everything that I loved. Again, checked all my boxes, and it was just such a fun time. Oh, so there you guys have it. Those are all of the books that I managed to read in December. I'm actually not currently reading anything right now because I have already read 5 books in January. I finished 2 books yesterday, and so I'm taking a little bit of a break before I pick up anything new. I'm currently sweating my ass off in this super thick sweater, so I'm going to go. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, give it a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and let me know down below what your favorite book that you read in December was, or a book that you've already read in January that you really enjoyed. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and I will see you later in another video very soon. Bye!